Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-A Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here as we approach the Christmas holiday. We are going bowling, gentlemen. We've got, I know how excited you are about a trip down to Tampa for the Gasparilla Bowl, which is nowhere near downtown. Well, actually, it's not too far from downtown. But are you as excited as the rest of the UCF fan base is?
A week from today, Jeffrey. A week from today, I'll be down there in Tampa.
Wow, you're making a full week bowl weekend, like a full weekend bowl trip out of it, there, Murph.
Well, the availability starts on the 19th, so I might as well get there. As you know,
your favorite city, your favorite city, Murph. You know, I know you've had some great memories in Tampa.
Let me tell you.
For those who are long listeners of the podcast, you know that good things always happen to me when I'm in Tampa, and I mean that in the strictest sarcastic terms possible.
All right, well, Eric, are you going to head down there and bodyguard Murph for a little bit? And
no.
No? Okay, all right. Murph, you're on your own. Sorry, bud. We are blackandgoldbanneret.com, SB Nation's home for the UCF Knights. UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Jeremy Brener is going to join us a little bit later to talk basketball as the UCF men's basketball team rolls through its non-conference schedule at a 7-2 record. But we are here first and foremost to talk football. No game, obviously, but the bowl game assignments came out, and UCF is going to the Gasparilla Bowl, sponsored by Bad Boy Mowers, which is kind of a joke in and of itself. It's in Tampa. This is the former St. Petersburg Bowl. It's now held at Raymond James Stadium. UCF has a chance to go I think when who pointed this out? I think Luke Sarris pointed this out on Twitter that it was that UCF has a chance to win more games in Tampa than USF has since last October, something like that. I don't know, but the opponent is the Marshall Thundering Herd, 8-4 out of Conference USA. Our old Flames from the MAC days, Eric Lopez. And CUSA, yeah, and. The UCF is a 17.5-point favorite in this game. The over, 95% of the money is on the over right now. It's 61.5. Kickoff is Monday, December 23rd at 2:30 p.m.
Gotta love that one, Murph. Gotta love that.
Doesn't matter.
It's a work day.
Work it all out.
Yeah, it's a work day. You get to do a game on a work day, right? It's all right. So, like I said, this is the former St. Pete Bowl. UCF's been to this bowl game 3 times before. They're 1-2. Their only win was against Ball State. First time they went back in 2009, where they lost to Rutgers. They also lost to North Carolina State by 7 points. Most recently, that was in 2014. Yeah. The reaction from the fan base. How would you characterize it, Brian Murphy?
Oh, I think you guys can handle that better than me.
Okay.
I'm not stepping into that one, Jeff.
Okay.
Murph wants to stay as the baby face, so he's not gonna. He's not gonna.
He's being there, yeah. Eric, go ahead and do your heel turn. Come on, you know it's coming.
Let's just say it's been lukewarm, huh? A little lukewarm, a little gasp. They were a little gasp at when they found out they were playing Marshall. And I think, look, I don't think the bowl destination is the issue they have with it. I mean, it's Tampa, Florida. It's an hour away. It's actually more fan-friendly. It's
True.
just the opponent, because nobody gives a bleep about Marshall, nor should they. So it's disappointing. But if you would have listened to last week's show, you shouldn't have been shocked because, Murph, give credit to Murph. He reported on when was it, Murph? Saturday?
Saturday.
Really, and you could kind of go more in detail if you want. It was really only two options for UCF, and that was the Military Bowl in Annapolis, and the attraction there was, hey, you can try to get an ACC opponent or Gasparilla. And I don't know, do you want to add more to that? I mean,
what were you able to glean from that in terms of how this all worked out, Murph?
Well, no, those were really. It's not like those were the only things that those were the only two bowls that they were considering, like, as a program. I'm sure if they wanted to, they probably could have reached out to other bowls, but those were the only two bowls that they were really looking at in either side. And I heard that the Hawaii Bowl was like a worst case scenario dark horse. But I mean, people might be upset at the bowl and the opponent, but UCF was going after one of those two bowls. I believe they might have favored the Military Bowl because of the higher profile opponent, but it was either or, and these were they wanted to be in one of these two bowls, and so this is what you end up at.
To what extent now does Danny White and UCF administration have any sort of pull on the Bulls to invite them to that? Because the Military Bowl ended up going with Temple out of the American. But
more geography friendly,
easier drive from Philly down to Annapolis. The thought has always been, why not match up UCF with an ACC team and see what happens in a bowl? But that's not happening. So, to what extent did UCF have any pull here, and how close was it?
I think it was pretty close. I mean, I know from their point of view, they really wanted it. How close is it? I think that really comes down to what ESPN wants. That's what happens. So how close was it? It depends on how close ESPN was to moving them to that bowl game. But really, that's what it's about. And I think Eric is better suited to talk about that because he knows the pull that those networks can have.
Well,
what do you think, Eric?
Everybody wants to blame TV, but really, here's the thing. It sounds great. I love hey, let's play the ACC team. Makes a ton of sense. It's a big opponent, so forth. I get it. Here's the problem. If you thought you were going to get Miami and Florida State, then I have a Brooklyn Bridge that I can sell you on because you were never going to get Miami or Florida State.
The ACC is not going to let that happen.
Well, no. I mean, and by the way, if you're the Military Bowl, do you really want two Florida teams to come to your game? Who are we kidding? Neither Florida State or Miami are going to bring people to this game. Nobody cares. Florida State have moved on. They're already thinking about. They're just wondering about their new coach, Mike Norvell, and what he's going to do for his staff. And Hurricane fans, I mean, they've moved on. They're right now following the Heat. Let's be honest. They don't even know what. If you asked a percentage of Hurricane fans probably couldn't even tell you right now what bowl game they're in. So, so those two options were never going to happen. And I feel like some people were for whatever reason and this is where I'm going to defend the fans. And I'm going to give Murph credit for this because he trashed the projections. And anybody that had projections of FSU and Miami playing UCF was out of their mind. And I think they misled the fans. And I think that's why some of the fans are ticked off. Now, that being said, so let's eliminate those two options. Okay. So what are your remaining options in the ACC? Well, Pittsburgh. Oh, wait, we played them already.
Right.
Bowl games usually do not want rematches. I mean, it's not interesting. And maybe some UCF people would have been excited because they could have gotten revenge on Pitt, but nobody cares. So that's not an attractive option. So now let's talk about the team that the Military Bowl ended up with, North Carolina. Ooh, that's not bad. Oh, wait, there's one problem. UCF opens the season with North Carolina.
Right.
No, I guarantee you, UCF nor North Carolina, the last thing they want to do, especially UCF, you don't want to play this team now who you're going to open the season with. Nobody ever wants to do that. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why Georgia, for example, in the big picture, stayed ahead of Florida. And I think they should have anyway. But it's one of the reasons why Georgia's in the Sugar Bowl and Florida's in the Orange Bowl. And you say, well, why? Well, because the opponent in the Orange Bowl is Virginia. Georgia opens the season next year against Virginia and Atlanta. The last thing they want to do is play in the Orange Bowl. So there's always these conversations. And yes, I hate to break it to some people in this audience, the ACC does have influence on this. They're a player in this. They're a partner in this. And they're like, hey, we would prefer that North Carolina go here and there and there. And usually what happens is the major conferences kind of say, okay, they talk to all these schools and are like, this is what we're thinking, this is where you're going to go. And usually most schools agree with it. So with all those options out of the way in the ACC, now you're left with what? Boston College and Birmingham? As somebody who's been to Birmingham on 3 occasions, that is not a reward. In fact, I would argue that's a punishment.
Plus, Boston College doesn't exactly move the needle as an ACC opponent, because that's another team that UCF has played before. Granted, it was years ago, but still, relatively recent memory.
And they're like 6-6, and they're looking for a head coach. And Wake Forest, do you want to play Wake Forest somewhere? Like, who the hell cares about Wake? So, I really think that thing
Wake
was
Forest
overblown.
doesn't even care about Wake Forest.
Correct. I really think the Military Bowl thing was overblown. And let's just say hypothetically UCF would have ended up in the Military Bowl. Maybe some people would have been more excited, but I don't think a lot of people would have gone to the game because it's right after Christmas and you're traveling up to Annapolis. At least in this bowl game in Tampa, you don't have to adjust your schedule that much. You just got to drive back and forth. Maybe you have to miss work on that day. But at the end of the day, I don't think there was any great options out there. And we've discussed this at length, so we're not going to get into it. Last week we talked about the Mike Oresco disappointment of his regime up to this point is the bowl game tie-ins, and hopefully that improves down the road. But I also want to make note that let's remind some of the fans here. Last I checked, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't win the American. We didn't play for the American Conference title game. Is that correct? We didn't win any divisions, correct?
Last I checked, that's correct. It checks out.
And last I checked, we're not in the top 25 like other teams in the league are. So it's not like we have, everybody was acting like, well, how dare they? Not like we had top priority in our own league anyway. Navy ended up in the Liberty Bowl, which I think is good for the league that they got the Liberty Bowl. And I think the reason why Navy got there is a couple of reasons. Navy didn't want to play another home game, so that's why they wanted to go Liberty. I think if in a normal year, the runner-up in the conference championship game would have played in the Liberty Bowl. The problem is Cincinnati played their last 2 games of the season at the Liberty Bowl.
Yeah,
I don't think they wanted.
We've been there, been on Beale Street. They've seen enough of it.
Exactly. And 2 losses. I think they're tired. They don't have good memory. So I think that's what happened in that situation. Look, SMU, who's got 10 wins and been in the top 25, they ended up in Boca to play FAU. So. And trust me, UCF. I mean, that's an option that was not on the table for UCF. You don't want to go to Boca and play FAU again, so that's stupid. So it is what it is. The opponent's disappointing, but that's life, and that's what happens when you have a million bowl games. You're going to have teams that probably you're going to play against. Sometimes you're going to play teams that probably don't even deserve to be in a bowl game if they actually had a normal number of games. But I think we're going to look back at this. This reminds me a lot of 2012. UCF in 2012 won 10 games. They went 10-4. And yet, I bet you I can name, if you asked UCF fans on the street off top of their hand without looking it up, who did you play in the 2012 bowl game? They wouldn't come up with the answer. Why? Because it was Ball State. What was it? Beef O'Brady's at the time?
It was then the Beef O'Brady's Bowl, yes. It's still the same. Everyone calls it the St. Pete Bowl because it was played in Tropicana Field. But, yeah, it's the Beef O'Brady's Bowl time. So.
Right, UCF beat Ball State 38. That was the year where it was Blake Bortles' first year as a starter. They had a good year. They lost in the conference title game to Tulsa in a controversial game in overtime where the whistle didn't blow. I don't even want to get into it. It's bad memories. Ironically enough, that year UCF blew out Marshall. But anyway, even though it was a good year, it kind of gets lost in this decade. As this decade ends, nobody remembers it because nobody cares about the fact they played Ball State that year. It's probably, you could argue this in this decade, it's probably the least memorable bowl game. Nobody remembers it, and I think we'll have the same reaction to this bowl game 5 years from now. Nobody will remember it. Brian will forget about it, and we'll never talk about this game after it's done.
Interestingly enough, it's that Beef O'Brady's Bowl against Ball State was UCF's last game as a member of Conference USA, and
Yep.
and that was their only win in that bowl game. So they're trying to get back to 500. Real quick. a lot of anger being tossed at the conference about this. Does the conference deserve blame?
Well, we talked about it last week, as I mentioned. The Bull tie-ins were not good. So
but for this year, the Bull tie-ins are what they are. They don't change year to year.
Yeah, correct. So you can't just shred the contract and start over this year. So no, again, what do you want them to do? Like, put a gun in there? Like, what game would have made you happy? Like, it just wasn't in the cards. And look, I mean, there's a lot of bowl game where you just shake your head at some of the matchups. And look, I hate to break it to people, it's an exhibition game. It's an exhibition game. Yeah. It's real simple.
It's a non-conference game.
It's either you like it and you want to go and you go and you whatever, have fun with it, or you don't. I mean, that's fine. Either way, it is what it is. You play in a bowl game, you play Marshall, you hope they take care of business. They're about a 17.5-point favorite. So they should take care of this Marshall team. It's not very good.
Yeah.
It's not. I will say this.
Yeah.
They are arguably the most talented team in Conference USA. They have their most conference selections, all selections. They have talent. This is a game, and we have plenty of time next week and all that to discuss this. Will this team be motivated? They better be motivated, because if you're not motivated, we've seen this in bowl games, and we saw this in the Cure Bowl a few years ago. If you're not prepared, if you're not motivated, you know the other team will be. You know Marshall will be motivated. If you don't come ready to play, you'll get beat. That's what we know in bowl games. So I do think that's going to be the interesting story, one of the plot lines in the next couple of weeks. But no, the league, there's nothing the league could do in this scenario. Nothing. So I think you just hope that in future years the league improves its bowl situation as time goes. But as far as this year, no, there was nothing that could be done. And if again, I do blame projections and other people that maybe leaked out information that maybe gave fans false hope.
Murph, one of the things that will probably contribute to how UCF comes out for this bowl game is personnel. Obviously, we got the news that Gabriel Davis is leaving for the NFL. Last we heard, he is going to play. Any other news on the personnel front that of guys who maybe might skip the game or any? Obviously, there's some transfer news that it's out there, so UCF will be shorthanded for a few role players in that thing. But anything new on the personnel side that we should be aware of, at least as of this week?
Nothing yet. On the night of on the day of the bowl announcement, we met with only a couple of players. We met with Jacob Harris and Jordan Johnson, and that's the extent of our interactions with the UCF football team since this announcement. So we really haven't talked to any coaches who have all been recruiting or being maybe siphoned away by other schools or other players. So, we really don't know a whole lot. I will say, when Gabe told the Sentinel that he was playing in the bowl game as of right now, his words were as of right now, that was the day in which he put out his post declaring for the draft. Mm-hmm. And that was before that we found out exactly where and whom UCF was playing in a bowl game. I wonder if that colors his decision at all. We have not heard from him since regarding his playing status. Maybe we'll talk to him this weekend. UCF will begin practicing for this bowl game, I believe, on Saturday. So we'll have a couple of team availabilities between Saturday and when this team leaves for Tampa on Wednesday. And so maybe we'll get something there. But, I would say, as of right now, we expect Gabe to play, but I wouldn't say it's 100% because it seemed like he left some wiggle room in his initial statement. And otherwise, we have not heard anybody else playing us out this game. Although, we do have Brandon Wimbush, who it's a long story, but he was on a podcast in which he said that UCF has already given him the go-ahead to start.
A really horrible podcast. Please don't ever listen to it. And I'm not talking. Look, there's two. I'll be real. I'm gonna shoot here. The old wrestling term.
Oh boy.
There's a lot of UCF podcasts out there. Okay, and I appreciate that. But really, in reality, there's only two good ones. It's us, and then the one with Trace on it. All right, that's all I'll say about it. So that way we don't. It's the one with Trace Trelko in it. But that he's very, they're very good too. They're good guys over there. And there's another one that's okay, but I won't mention. But outside of that, that's it. Unfortunately, Brandon Wimbush was not on either of these shows. It was really atrocious. But somehow, by some fluke, we actually got news out of this, right?
We sure did. Brandon Wimbush was a part of this podcast. No one is sure exactly how he was made available for this because he's technically still a part of, UCF Athletics. But anyway, on this podcast, Wimbush said that he has been given the go-ahead by UCF to begin preparing for the draft and the combine. And thus, he will not be participating in the bowl game. So
it's a very euphemistic way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we know Brandon Wimbush won't be playing in this bowl game. And so as far as, he did have a slight role on this offense. So as far as, quote-unquote impact players, I use that in the loosest term possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have a feeling that wasn't really okay, you want to, that's fine, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so his time as a UCF Knight is done. He will train for the pros now, which is, by the way, there's no one should have any animosity toward that at all. Let him do what he wants to do and look toward his pro future. That's absolutely fine. Again, as Eric said, this is an exhibition. Especially when it's not a New Year's Six game or a playoff game, it's a complete exhibition. Maybe we'll find out before this game. In the couple weeks.
Well, I was going to bring that up, Brian. I mean, what are the chances that we don't even know until literally kickoff, right?
Possibly. Possibly. We may not know about guys who are sitting out. They'll know, and then we won't know because of competitive advantages and wanting to have that edge over the opponent. The opponent has to prepare for them, but then they don't play. So, yeah, I understand that. Also, we could have players obviously declare for the draft after the bowl game as well, as happened last year with a couple of players. So, all these questions have yet to be answered. Maybe we'll try to find some answers this weekend. I know everyone will ask about Gabe as soon as we talk to Heupel and see what his status is. And otherwise, we really have no idea of who else will sit out, if anyone else will. But that's where we are right now. Not a whole lot to report.
We do know that Jacob Harris got his 6th year, though.
Sure did. That's something that Jacob Harris, wide receiver, had sort of been vying for basically the entire season, and found out recently that he had been granted a 6th year of eligibility. So, he was a redshirt senior, so you were looking at the prospect of losing both him and Gabe out of that receiving corps. Well, Jacob Harris is coming back. You assume with Trey Nixon as well. Marlon Williams will be there as well. And then you could have, Kevon Ahmad step up. Jalen Robinson, the transfer from Oklahoma, would be eligible next season. So, I don't know. There may not be a Gabe Davis quality wideout on this team next season. But that coverage certainly will not be bare, and it certainly helps that Jacob Harris is back, and it will help too to have him get another year of experience under his belt. He knows that he is a very raw wide receiver. I mean, before this, even when he was at Western Kentucky, before he transferred here, he was basically a tight end / special teams player. He really had no experience playing at wideout before this season, and I would say, he's been pretty good. He's mostly been a down the field threat, large yards per reception average. Maybe next year he works more on his route running and hands, all that stuff. He's looking forward to it. We talked to him last Sunday night. He's looking forward to the offseason and getting better for next year. But I think the overarching news is that yes, he will be back, and that's pretty big news for this offense.
And I guess the last little bit we can kind of talk about here is, and obviously nothing is final yet, but indications are that Jeff Lebby, the quarterback coach, is going to leave UCF to join new head coach Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. By the way, Kevin Smith is also apparently heading to Oxford.
Oh, he is. In fact, this tells you a lot about Kevin. When Lane Kiffin was introduced on Monday, he was the first guy he mentioned as far as bringing back, coming to his staff.
Yeah.
That was the first guy that hey, you're coming with me, which I think is high praise. And I think Jeff, you and I are friends with Kevin. I'm super excited for him. I think this is a huge step for Kevin.
Yeah, could not be happier for him.
Absolutely. And I think about what he's capable of doing. What a job he did at FAU. I mean, Devin Singletary who's now with the Buffalo Bills, developed him at FAU and things. Imagine what he's going to do with some of the running backs.
I know.
That he's going to be able to get at Ole Miss, the SEC. Holy smokes. I mean, so let's I'm super stoked for Kevin Smith, and I feel like that's kind of gotten under the radar in this story, in this deal, which, by the way, he is the second former UCF player now that's going to be coaching in the conference, Jeffrey, with your buddy Mr. Hinshaw in Kentucky.
Yeah, Darren Hinshaw, the passing game coordinator at Kentucky. That's right. So, but, part of what is going by the wayside is Jeff Lebby will be leaving. He's the quarterback coach. Remember, there is no offensive coordinator. Josh Heupel's the offensive coordinator. So, Brian, this is how big of a loss will this be with the work that Lebby did with Mackenzie Milton 2 years ago and Dylan Gabriel last year?
Well, I mean, it's expected. That's my whole take on this. Is that it's absolutely expected. I mean, UCF, I believe, was one of only 3 programs that had all coaches back from last year. It's a very low number, and it's not what happens in the sport. You get poached, no matter if you're in a G5 league or a P5 league, you're going to lose coaches. Turnover is a part of this game. So this is another instance where people should not be upset about Jeff Lebby leaving. It's certainly leaving for Ole Miss probably means a pretty hefty pay raise, as well as being in a much higher profile league. Sorry to break it to you.
More than twice the money he's making. More than twice.
Everyone listening to this podcast who might be upset about Jeff Lebby, you would take that deal too.
Yeah, and Jeff Lebby too. We all thought he was gone after last season. I believe he had feelers from other SEC universities to take over in the same capacity, and he returned to UCF. So really, we got UCF fans got an extra year at Jeff Lebby that this last spring we didn't expect. So take that for what it's worth. Take that for the fact that UCF was able to hold the staff together for 2 full seasons, which is just a unicorn in this business. And I would imagine that this is not the only coach that leaves the staff, and that's not going to be something to fret about. That is just part of the business.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a bad sign if people weren't interested in your coaching staff.
Right.
So you take it as a positive. Hey, people are interested in your coaching staff because they think they're good. That's how this sport works. And for Jeff, it's not an official as we record, but it's a great move, and it's a step up for him. And like I said, he's going to make more than twice as much going over there. Like if a newspaper in Oxford came over to Murph and offered him almost triple the salary that he's currently making, I think Murph would say goodbye to us, Jeffrey, and he wouldn't even blink to cover an SEC team. So I spoke to David Johnson, who covers Ole Miss there for 24/7. And actually, because I interviewed him for a separate story there where the softball head coach had resigned abruptly, and Ruben Felix, who's the interim now head coach, he's a former UCF assistant, ironically.
Yeah, that's right.
From 2011 to 2014, he's going to be the interim head coach for the 2020 season. So I had him on the softball podcast I host, In the Circle. You can follow it, In the Circle. It's beat, cheap plug. But I talked to him off the air about Lebby, and what was interesting is that Lebby was their top target because there was a lot of speculation about Kendall Briles, but evidently, Lebby's a guy that Lane Kiffin, I think, targeted, and I think obviously it speaks very highly of Jeff Lebby, and that's not a bad guy to be. Let me say what you will about Lane Kiffin, but he has been successful, and that's a pretty high-profile staff, and so you wish him the best.
Yeah,
and also per USA Today, which has the salaries of every coach in D1 football, basically, Jeff Lebby was the second highest paid assistant on UCF staff. He was making $375,000 this year. The only assistant making more money than him was, interestingly enough, offensive line coach Glenn Ellerby, making $425,000 this season.
Not Randy Shannon?
No, well, Randy Shannon has salary from Florida.
Okay.
He's earning. So anyway, But
discount.
Basically,
right.
Jeff Lebby is. I mean, is it Eric? Is he going to be a millionaire after this contract?
When I talked to David Johnson, I mean, it remains to be seen, obviously, until he thinks it could be anywhere in a minimum of 600 to maybe 900,000, and that's not including incentives. So you're right, Murph.
I'll take it.
Massive.
He could make $1 million if you include incentives, assuming he ends up being the offense coordinator, and obviously gets to work with Lane Kiffin in the SEC.
Not bad.
Toddy, y'all. I mean, that's hey, man, that's life. You get work now. Look, now I will defend the fans in this standpoint. They're going to be agitated because, I guess there's already a couple of recruits that UCF had that all of a sudden are now talking to Ole Miss. I mean, that's life. Welcome to life and recruiting in the South college football.
And by the way, if they want to go to Ole Miss, let them go to Ole Miss. If they want to stay here at UCF, great.
Right.
That's the bottom line. What are you going to say? So, sad to see Jeff Lebby go. Although it does open the door for de facto quarterback coach Mackenzie Milton, doesn't it?
Oh, you'd love it,
Coach KZ. It's going to happen eventually.
I also will say this: sometimes a tweak in the staff ain't the worst thing in the world. If you bring somebody else, gets a different perspective. Sometimes you improve on that.
True.
So, we're gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Even if Murph's right and they lose, that's just life. And you tweak your staffs and you move on. You'll be very talented. By the way, can I give you guys a useless UCF Bowl fact here?
Okay.
This is very useless, but it's very entertaining. Because Murph will appreciate it. This game, the UCF will be playing, of course, will be at Raymond James, home of the Tampa Bay Bucks. This will be the second bowl game that UCF will play in a stadium that will be hosting WrestleMania a few months later. How about that? The first time this happened, and hopefully this trend does not continue, was in the Cure Bowl when UCF played back in the Citrus Bowl against Arkansas State in December of 2016. And then a few months later, myself and Murph was at WrestleMania in Orlando. My question to you, Murph, A, are you concerned about that trend? And B, does that mean that we're going to have a WrestleMania in Tampa in April that at the time when you're there in person looks pretty awesome and exciting, but then does not really age very well as the time goes by?
Oh, are you trying to draw parallels between a WrestleMania to come and this future bowl game? Is that what you're doing with that statement?
That's right. That's all we do here at the Black Gold Banneret. That's correct.
I'm just glad that Eric made a wrestling reference, and thus we can move forward with content hearts.
Are you still upset about Undertaker retiring, but then changing his mind? He retired in that match.
Oh my God, I can't stop it.
We all are upset, Eric. Every single one of us got rocked.
We gotta ask Greg Lovelady about that. I don't think we ever asked him about it.
Every single one of us got jerked around emotionally, as if we should have trusted WWE. We never should, but we got jerked around, and we were made fools of.
Well, you're right, Eric. That was a totally useless fact, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to
wait till later in the show where I get Murph to talk about a baseball player that somehow has indirect ties to UCF that made a lot of money this week.
Oh, okay. All right. Stick around for that a little bit later, but coming up next, Jeremy Brener is going to join us to talk a little hoops as the Knights roll through the month of December with a 7-2 record. Plus, we'll also catch you up on a little bit of women's basketball as well as they get back into play later this week. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with us here. We're talking hoops now, and joining us to talk hoops, both women's and men's, is Jeremy Brener, who has been doing a lot of basketball coverage for us because, Murph has been doing his stuff for the Sentinel, and obviously we're big fans of that. And it's he's dropping Murph bombs left and right over there for.
Oh, stop it! Stop it!
So let's start with the men's team coming off a 79-66 win over are we calling them just Green Bay, or are we calling them Wisconsin Green Bay? I know we're not supposed to call them the Packers, right?
Go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry.
Well, just for the sake of just as simple as possible, we'll go Green Bay.
Okay. So they are. What are they called?
Or should we call them Phoenix? Because
the Phoenix. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Any more confusing?
Another W for UCF. They've won 4 in a row now after the loss. That one toenail lost to Penn. They're now 7-2. I watched this game the whole way through, and both of you guys were there. I know Green Bay is struggling right now. Can't read too much into this, but it was nice to see UCF kind of take care of business. It was not as close as the score indicated. 5 nights in double figures. Cesar DeJesus and Colin Smith had 14 apiece. Dazon Ingram only had 6, but 6 rebounds and 5 assists, and I thought he was just toying with people in terms of handling the ball in that game. As we head down the stretch here, and Jeremy, I will start with you. With 3 games left until the new year and conference play, do you think that this team is starting to gel a little bit more?
I think that's safe to say, especially considering where they were. This is 9 new players on this team, and the thing is, though, is something that I hope they figure out before conference play begins is this team still lacks a cohesive, understood identity, and that's something that's difficult to come up when you got a whole bunch of parts from a bunch of different places. But that's the one thing that this team still needs to figure out is it does not have a clear-cut identity like the team last year did. Like the Johnny Dawkins is still about defense, but this is more of an offensive team, and there's no real clear, bona fide offensive scoring threat yet. And it's a bunch of parts that don't necessarily fit together yet. And I say yet because I do have hope that they will figure it out. But as of now, I'm glad there's 3 games before conference play. I'll leave it at that.
What do you think, Murph?
I think I disagree a little bit. I think the identity of this team is still defense. I think the identity of this team is actually what it was last year. I mean, it's just not as good. I mean, it's still defense. To be frank, let's be frank. It's still gonna be like we want to win on the defensive side of the ball. And Johnny was upset after the Green Bay game because of how poor his defense was in the second half. Green Bay shot 75% in the second half of that game, and so Johnny was upset. Said, we're not that type of team. We don't want to outscore you. I think that's always going to be this team's MO. However, there is not a star player on this team. I think that's what maybe Jeremy means by identity, because you just don't know who's going to take over on any given night, and really. That may not be a bad thing. I mean, we've seen this now 2 games in a row with 5 scores in double digits. So there's not a star player on this team, I don't think. Which again, you don't know where it's going to come from every night. But if they keep with the balanced scoring and the defense picks up a little bit, then I think they'll be okay.
That's the thing. They want to be a defensive team, but how much of a defensive team can you be when you let up 75% scoring in the second half of a game at home? That's my issue. Is they want to be a defensive team, but they're not. They haven't played like one. Is kind of where I'm at least their most recent showing. And that's something they're going to have to work towards. That Johnny Dawkins said in the presser that he doesn't want to be the team that wins a shootout, because there are better teams that will beat them in shootouts. They are more likely to win games when they're holding teams under 60 points. They're more likely to win a 65-60 game than they are an 85-80 game, if you will.
I feel like that second half was a bit of an aberration, too, because, I mean, what team realistically shoots 75% in a half? I mean, and obviously the defense is going to take some of the heat for that, but let's pour a little bit out for Green Bay here and give them some credit for making some shots, too. And even so, they still lost by, UCF still won the game by 13 points. And by the way, for Green Bay, it was Amari Davis who was. Amari Davis was 12 of 14 from the field for 25 points. I mean, that's an astoundingly good line right there.
Without a pre-pointer, 0 3-pointers.
Not even an attempt. Attempt too. So, and yet still UCF outscored Green Bay on points in the point, nearly doubling them in that category. So, all right, the last 3 games, they got 3 games in the span of 7 days. Sacred Heart on Sunday, Bethune on Wednesday. Those games are at home, and then at Oklahoma Saturday. I know everyone's looking at Oklahoma, but these 2 games coming up. These are a couple more good, laboratory games. I think, wouldn't you say, Jeremy? Like, can they work out the kinks before conference play?
Yeah, laboratory is a good word for that, Jeff. I think what I want to see more of is more definition for, and I think that what Dawkins is kind of trying to put on the team is he's trying to define the roles better for a lot of these guys. I think Darren Green's found a bit more of a role. I think Colin Smith is the most he understands his role the most, and I think that comes from experience, and it just comes from playing in Dawkins' system longer than most of the other guys. Matt Milan is starting to get some confidence, and I think having him come off the bench as someone who can get you a quick 3 or just a couple quick threes is something that I think that works for him. I like the idea of Dre Fuller in the starting lineup, kind of as that guy that can start you off, because it doesn't, for me, I think it takes Milan a little bit of time on the court to get going, whereas Dre can kind of start the game off on the right foot, where Matt needs a little bit of time. But the thing is, I still think that Brandon Mahan's role is a little bit up in the air. I think that who else? I mean, I think you look at him.
Yeah,
Caesar's also someone that knows his role a little bit more. But I think that's what I want to see more. I think Brandon Mahan might be one of the more talented guys on the team. But I think the reason why we haven't seen the most potential come out of him, I think, is because he still needs to try to find out where he best fits with the team. And I think once Mahan gets in a rhythm, I think that's when we'll see this team at its full potential.
What do you think, Murph? What do you want to see from these last 3 games?
Well, I think people look at the record and they look at 7-2, and I think that might open some eyes. But no matter what is said after each of these wins, UCF really hasn't proven, I don't think yet, that it can beat a really good team. The best team they faced so far this year is Miami. They lost at home. Mm-hmm. Arguably, the second best team they faced this year was Penn, and that game should have gone to overtime if Darren Green is if there's not 4 3-point lines on the court. but arguably they've lost their 2 toughest opponents this year. They really haven't beaten anybody that great. I think Pepperdine's their best win, and that's not saying a whole lot. And these two games before Oklahoma aren't going to really raise your profile at all. I can see this team being 9-2, but I don't know if it tells us anything about how good this team is. I've said now for a couple of weeks this team is better than I initially thought, and that's simply because of how they're playing, just with like how well they're moving the basketball, how well they're sharing the ball. I think their diversity in scoring is something that I didn't expect. So in that way, I do think they're better on the court, but I still don't know how good this team is, and we really won't know until they get to Oklahoma, and then they open up the conference season with a pretty hard test right away. They go with Temple, Houston, SMU, Cincinnati. I mean, those are 4 arguably 3 of those teams are top 50 in college basketball, and SMU's not bad either. SMU's better than Penn or Pepperdine. So, I think they should win these next 2 games, be 9-2. That'd be great. But it's kind of empty 9-2, and then we'll see what they do in those next 5 against some really good competition.
Yeah, Oklahoma, by the way, they're 7-1, and their only game that they've lost was to Stanford. They lost the game by 19 points, but they kind of been beaten up on everybody. They beat up on Oregon State, beat Minnesota by 9. They beat Mizzou by 11. Yeah. So, and then they've got, interestingly enough, they've got they just beat North Texas by only 2. That was in Denton. But they're at Wichita State, interestingly enough, on Saturday. So that might be an interesting little thing to watch against a fellow American Athletic Conference opponent. Switching over to the women's side real quick, we really don't have much to talk about though because they haven't played.
Nope.
They've had this long break after they had that stretch of games where, and right now they're still sitting at 4-4 overall, but they've lost their last 2. Those are the 2 close games out in Virginia. We talked about that on last week's show. They got Quinnipiac on Tuesday at home at 6 p.m., followed by the holiday tournament, which they're going to have St. Mary's and Wright State on the slate. Not much really to glean from this in particular. They got one more non-conference game against Central Michigan the day before New Year's Eve, before they start conference play on January the 5th. But, hey, 4-game home stretch, right? Or actually a 5-game home stretch, excuse me. Can't really beat that in terms of trying to right the ship a little bit. Although St. Mary's, the Gales right now are also 4-4, so they're kind of a little bit desperate for a W here. Wright State, on the other hand, the Raiders, they've got their next game at Iowa State. The women's team does. And right now, their schedule shows them. I'm actually trying to pull it up here. It's hard to bring up on their website. They're 5-3 right now.
Well, I mean, you can look at the opponent's records, Jeff. I'll just say that the biggest thing for this team is that KK Wright is expected to be healthy for these games, and the long break has certainly helped her. Again, remember she hurt herself, or she got hit hard early in the tournament they played in Virginia. Mm-hmm. They're playing UCLA, and so she played only 4 minutes up there in those 2 games. Did not play in the second game of that tournament, but they said that it's just precautionary, and so this long break has helped her heal up, and they should have her back there on the floor when they're ready to go against Quinnipiac.
Yeah, Quinnipiac is not good, by the way. They're only 1-5 on the year. The only team they've beaten was Bucknell at home, so they got throttled by Maryland 107-52 back on November the 24th. So it's been a rough go for the Bobcats this year. So obviously a couple of there's a couple teams that are going to be desperate heading into conference play, trying to right the ship. But Quinnipiac might be particularly desperate. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as we go through. And you're absolutely right about KK Wright, because it wasn't just that, right? Because she was banged up before that already, and it with just a series of nagging injuries. So now we're hopefully going to have her back at least as fully healthy as possible. And one other, I'm not sure if we're going to see her, but Grace Stant, also the redshirt senior from Red Bank, New Jersey, she's been out with an injury, and no word. I haven't seen any word on her. Have you guys?
I have not.
Okay, I wasn't sure, but she was the transfer from Villanova. They were hoping to have her at least to contribute down low and help out on the rebounding side, although they've actually been pretty good to this point. So, all right, we're going to bid farewell to Jeremy, and thank you for your contributions as always, JB. You can follow him at Jeremy Brener. And what else you got coming up for us over the winter break, Jeremy?
We'll have the round table to wrap up football season right after Christmas. I have that started, and then we're going to start some basketball round tables right before conference play. And I may have Let's Not Talk Basketball or 2 from either the men's or the women's side. So be sure to check that out on the blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Dig it. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, stick around. We'll be right back, and we'll talk a little bit more about volleyball wrapping up their season and some men's soccer news as well. Stick around. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast as we wrap it up here on our Thursday show. Some news to pass along from men's soccer real quick. 2 UCF Knights are heading to the MLS College Showcase. It's kind of like the combine, if you will. Louis Perez, and, of course, Cal Jennings. Obviously trying to increase their profile as if they had to do that anymore, especially if you're Cal Jennings, one of the most prolific goal scorers in school history, but wish them best of luck in that. What the MLS draft, by the way, should be happening fairly soon, if I'm not mistaken here.
Well, I believe it's January. I want to say January in Baltimore. I want to say.
Yes, January 2020 in Baltimore, Maryland. So no official. It doesn't look like any official date has been set. Inter Miami, Eric, has the number 1 pick.
Oh boy, David.
Yep.
There you go.
And they have number 3 from a trade. Orlando City drafts 5th. Quick, your odds that Orlando City picks Cal Jennings.
Probably not very high, because that would mean that would be a real cool move and a smart move. And when was the last time Orlando City did that?
Oh, Eric off the top rope.
But look, I could tell you, we had Travis Clark here prior to the postseason, and he talked about him as a legit first-round draft pick. I haven't heard much about Louis, but I think Cal will be a first-round guy, and it won't be the last time we hear about him. I think he'll be playing professionally. Now, keep in mind the way it works. He might have to start off at a USL and then move to the MLS. It just depends on the developments and where he goes and things like that. But, I'm excited to see where Cal lands. And, look, continue quietly a nice tradition here at UCF, Jeffrey, of players that end up going to the MLS. I mean, that's the thing. You come to UCF men's soccer, and I'm sure Coach Calabrese will uses this as part of his recruiting tool. That's something that Brian Cunningham was successful with, is bringing guys here, and then they end up playing and have success in the MLS. And we've had UCF players that have been successful not only in the MLS, but even internationally.
Yep. So, I don't know. I'm hoping against hope we see more of Cal locally. We don't know, but hey, maybe they might surprise us here.
They're due for a good move. Maybe
they are. UCF Volleyball, meanwhile, on our last podcast, obviously we did the they had the victory over Florida State in the first round of the NCAA tournament. First win over in the first round of the NCAA in 16 years. Of course, the nice run came to an end the following day with the loss to Florida by 25-21, 25-18, 25-17. Just way too much Gators in that match. Held UCF to 145 while they hit 380. The Gators are really good this year. I think that's been established. Paige Hammonds and Rachel Kramer were the stars of the match for Florida, and they did exactly what they needed to do in order to take down UCF. I think it was a little bit also of the fact that UCF was tired after that 5-setter the night before, whereas Florida had absolutely zero problem dispatching Alabama State the night before as well. Playing 5 sets against an in-state opponent will take a lot out of you. And in addition to the fact that Florida's size is just amazing, they had 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" across the front line. Rachel Kramer, actually, who had 15 kills for Florida, she's 6'6" at least. So, nonetheless, when we look back on the 2019 UCF volleyball team, Eric Lopez, what's going to be the legacy of this team? Because Coach Dagenet was, after the match, he was. I thought what he said was really spot on. He said, I'm trying to find the tweet actually here. Here it is. He said, still trying to capture an amazing season and enjoy it. We worked so hard on and off the court to be the best we could be to make you proud. This truly was a historic year. Thanks for the support and messages all year long, Todd. By the way, McKenna Melville made the AVCA Southeast All-Region team, obviously well deserved. What's the legacy of this team coming out of this year?
It's historic. I mean, it's weird, Jeffrey, and I as great as last year was, as dominant as last year was, I think this year's team will be actually more memorable. And the reason is because they win that. Not only they win the conference tournament, but it was a classic match that aired on ESPNU against Cincinnati. and then you beat Florida State, who you haven't beaten since 1984, and you win your first NCAA tournament match since 2003. And it was exciting. And I mean, do you not agree with me? Even though, like, record-wise, if you look at it, I mean, that last year's team was more dominant, more consistent, but it kind of reminds me a little bit, kind of like the Miami Heat in 05, where they were more consistent and you could, more had better record than the 06 Heat team. But people will remember the 06 Heat team because they won the championship. The 05 team did. They lost in the conference. I feel the same way about this. I think this was a huge step to win an NCAA tournament match, win the conference tournament. This is now 3 straight years you've been to postseason, 2nd straight year you made the NCAA tournament. And I think, moving forward, the future is bright because you have on your roster a lot of players coming back, including McKenna Melville, who, again, as I've said in previous podcasts, is on track to be maybe the greatest player in the history of this program.
At least in this era, certainly, possibly.
Right, that's fair. That's a fair comment. We're not going to comment on players we didn't see, in different eras and things like that. So, they beat Florida State, as we talked about, the 5-set defensive match. Look, Florida was just, man, I mean, they got 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" players. They didn't even have their best player playing, but they're so tall, and that's why it agitates me. And I think Coach Todd agrees. In fact, I think he kind of agreed with me on a tweet, Jeff. I don't know if you saw that, where we were commenting about the year in the league. If they would just, seed the tournament properly instead of go based on, man, we got to limit bus. We got to have only like 15 bus rides for this tournament. Hey, let's send that Orlando team over to Gainesville for 2 hours. Yeah. Like, I would imagine if UCF, for example, and maybe you could say, hey, they seeded it correctly. Maybe they didn't. Imagine like if UCF was placed in Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky was a top 16 national seed. I would have loved their chances better because, no disrespect to Western Kentucky, I'm pretty confident they don't have 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" players. And there's something to be said for not, like Western Kentucky's not seen McKenna Melville in person. So there's that. And Coach Gillespie, Renee Gillespie, the former UCF coach, used to tell me this. She would have preferred to always play somebody that didn't know her personnel than go to Gainesville because Florida knows your personnel.
Right.
Mary Wise knows that you mentioned this. They play in the spring. Sometimes they play in the regular season. So Florida wasn't surprised by anything that UCF did. They know that personnel. And unfortunately, Florida has more of it. They have more talent. They have more depth. They have more size. It's a tough matchup for UCF, whereas if UCF were to be seeded somewhere else and go to Western Kentucky, they don't know the UCF personnel. I think that would have worked to UCF's advantage. It is what it is. That's my rant, my monthly rant about the Olympic sports getting screwed over in seedings.
Yeah, here's
for the moment. Check back in softball season. We'll we'll review this again.
Well, here's what Todd said, kind of retweeting your tweet there, Eric. He said, imagine a day when 32 or all 64 teams in a tournament are seeded, not just the top 16. Every Olympic sport in Florida is going to play an Elite 8 or Final 4 match in the first or second round. That's just the way it is. And he's exactly right, because the quality of play between Florida, Florida State, Miami, SEC, ACC, across the Olympic sports is so high that even when you get a bumper year from UCF or USF or a school like FAU or FIU, it's not like it is in other places where you could have an easier path. It's just the fact that the talent is so concentrated in this state. It's a tough road. It's a tough road every single time, and you're absolutely right.
And by the way, my favorite comment of his he had obviously have press conferences in the NCAA tournament. My favorite thing he said was after the Florida State match, and I think they asked him about the matchup and all that and preparing, and he's like, and he had basically came out clean and admitted, we've kind of known this for 2 weeks, honestly, because of the quote predictability of the NCAA committee, which I applauded, I clapped. He basically said, me and Brian, we pretty much knew we were going to play Florida State, and we had a kind of smirk when we saw it. And he's right. He's right, Jeffrey. Let's be real, and that's what frustrates me. This is why I always rant about this. If you and I would have come like middle of October and did a volleyball projection, we would have nailed this.
Right.
We would have said they were going to play. It's so goddamn predictable. It's a joke. I'm glad he kind of called it out in his own way. By saying that they prepared a couple weeks for Florida State after the volleyball because they knew that was going to be the matchup. And he was right about that. So, but again, phenomenal year. The program is as healthy as it's ever been. And let's give credit also, and he mentioned this in the press conference as well, but we'll do this, Jeffrey, as well. His staff, Brian Doyen and Jenny Maurer. I will make this argument, okay? And this is no disrespect. This is not meant as a knock to any other assistants on campus. I think we have a lot of great assistants on staff at every sport. But in my opinion, if you ask me, who has the best assistant coaches in their staff on campus, I think it's tied with Brian and Jenny. I think they're the best staff on campus. You know Brian better than I do. I got to know Brian a little bit this year. You've known Brian better. I know Jenny very well, and I've said this. The day that Jenny arrived here, I think this program took a different level. I think the talent has improved in the offense. She runs the offense, and she has very creative. I think that's been a huge help, and I think Todd Dagina even said in the press conference, he has 2 head coaches on his staff, basically.
Yeah.
That's very rare.
It's absolutely right.
So I think Jenny's been a huge part of this success, and Brian as well. As I'll defer to you because you know Brian better than I do, but he's a great defensive coach. He handles defense.
Yeah, Brian is a genius on defense, and Todd particularly called out his the game plan that he had for the championship match against Cincinnati. And I don't want to get out of here without also passing along congrats to and pouring one out for Cameron Stevens, the volunteer assistant, which means he gets paid zero money to do this. He was a high school coach here in Orlando for a long time. Todd brought him on board. It was a tremendous value add to the staff. And then also the director of operations, TJ Reed, who's so good at his job that Team USA sat up and took notice. And he worked with Team USA over the summer. It really is an all-star coaching staff that they've assembled, and the fruits of their labor have really blossomed over the last 2 years, and we've seen that with back-to-back conference titles. And I think you're right. This team will probably be maybe not, I don't know if they're as good as last year's, but they might be more memorable because of that moment on ESPN, winning the conference title and giving that to the university in such thrilling fashion and winning that first round match. I think that's tremendous. And they overcame, a lot of things, that it seemed like there were a lot of the things that kind of fell into place last year. They kind of didn't. I think even Todd, if we hooked him up to a lie detector, would tell us, we kind of lucked into that long win streak last year. I think that maybe that team was, I hate saying this because it feels like it casts aspersions on the team, but maybe they weren't quite as good as their record indicated. But this year's team was better than their record indicated in terms of the overall quality. So 5 seniors going by the wayside, but we're going to have a lot new. But obviously Anne Marie Watson's still going to be around. McKenna Melville's still going to be around. They should be. Right? They should be the favorites. With Jordan Thompson moving on, they should be right up there once again. And when you've got the best remaining player in the league coming back, you should be favorites.
Well, let me ask you this, because first of all, this is the most successful year in the league's history in volleyball. Mm-hmm. They got 2 teams into the round. They got a team finally into the Sweet 16. Cincinnati upset the ACC champions, number 6 seed Pitt, in 5 sets. Dramatic match. One of the things I actually want to ask Coach Dagina in the future, I actually hate the volleyball NCAA tournament schedule. Like, why is it scheduled around conference championship football Saturday? I think I know the answer to that, but I wish it was scheduled maybe a week later where it has more exposure, because that was a phenomenal match, Cincinnati and Pitt. But anyway, both of those teams had tremendous years. They both beat ACC teams. They went 2-0 against the ACC, with UCF beating FSU and UCF beating Cincinnati beating Pittsburgh. This American Conference was rated 7th in the RPI. ACC was number 5. The Horizon was number 6, which is why sometimes you can't. That's why the RPI sometimes is not the Bible. They're a little flawed. I don't really understand that. But I think we all agree the American's better than the Horizon. So I think you can make an argument, Jeffrey, that this league is a top 6, and with their wins against the ACC is maybe a top 5 league. The thing that hurts the league are the bottom teams. They got to get better. That hurts the RPI and things like that. The fact that UConn's leaving is going to help that, but with all due respect, they weren't very good, and they weren't good in RPI. Question to you is, and I kind of asked this question. I think UCF, as we mentioned, is the favorite. I know you've got questions about Cincinnati and how good they're going to be moving forward without Jordan Thompson. That's a legit question. I still think they have enough talent to still be a contender. Are they going to be as good as they've been? No. I still think they could be a tournament team program. The question is, who's the next program? How do we get to being a 3 to 4 bid league? Who's that program? Because that's, to me, what's holding us back is who's that team that can that program step up?
You know, that's such a good question. I still feel like I don't know what's going on at Wichita right now, but they are going to. I think they're going to be better. It was 2 years ago they went undefeated in their first year in the conference,
right?
And just rolled through everybody, and then all of a sudden the bottom dropped out of them.
Right, you can argue they've been a disappointment since, because I remember when they first arrived in the league, everybody talked about the men's basketball, but a lot of people said volleyball, that they were going to enhance volleyball. So that's a great point.
I would like to see. I would like to see more out of Wichita State. They finished last in the West. I think they're better than that. SMU and Tulane seem to be on the up and up, and I really like what they're doing over at Houston in terms of getting that program on track. Houston's coach was the coach of the year in the conference, so I actually think the improvement is to be had out west. I think in the East it's still, and obviously the divisions are going away after this year with UConn leaving, but those are the schools I think are on the verge of kind of making a move right here is Houston and Tulane. And then if Wichita can get its act together back to what it was, I think it shouldn't be hard for them to be dangerous once again. So volleyball heads into the offseason. Meanwhile, Eric, you had a note about baseball from Murph you wanted to pass along here?
That's right. Let's bring it back to Murph here. Murph, welcome back to the show.
Well, before you unleash whatever it is you're about to say, because again, this is one of those things like last week. I have no idea what you're going to say.
I think I know it. I think I know what it's about. But anyway, go ahead.
I would like to correct one thing, and I know it's totally out of my purview usually, but Cincinnati volleyball, yes, I'm going there. Actually lost at Pitt in August, early season, and so this is actually a revenge win for them. So they didn't actually go undefeated against ACC teams, but it kind of makes their win against Pitt this past week more impressive because they got swept at Pitt back in August, now win in a 5-setter here in the tournament. I think it's impressive.
The conference did go undefeated against the ACC in the tournament, we should clarify.
That's what I meant. But very good. I love the facts, though. I love that. I did not know that.
Eric, we just got fact-checked by Murph on volleyball.
Now we get back to my comfort zone.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. By the way, Cincinnati, I believe, will play Penn State in the Sweet 16. If you want to
That's correct.
That. There you go. So there's obviously a hot stove, big week of hot stove news in Major League Baseball.
Yanks got Garrett Cole.
The Yankees got Garrett Cole for a lot of money, I heard.
Yeah.
In fact, LeBron James was talking about that in the pregame. He's a Yankee fan, as you know, Mr. Murph. LeBron is a Yankee fan, so he was very excited about Garrett Cole and 36 million. But that's not actually what I'm going to talk about first.
Okay.
Over the years, I've been going to UCF baseball games since 2000. I've covered them for a lot of years. I've broadcasted them. I've gone as a fan. The best player that I ever saw play UCF on campus in baseball is and was Anthony Rendon, who played at Rice. UCF played Rice in Conference USA. There was that 1 year in 2012 where they played in the last weekend of the regular season for the Conference USA title, and Rice won 2 out of 3. But the best college baseball player I ever saw play against UCF was Anthony Rendon. And he's a very rich man now, Murph, and he's moving out west, making history here.
Yes, $240. If someone offered me $245 million over 7 years, I'd move anywhere too. Good for Anthony Rendon. By the way, that 2012 season, I believe that was the year in which he was a Golden Spikes semifinalist that year for Rice. He was not a finalist, although Chris Duffy was for UCF, which again continues to be.
Oh man, that is great. I love that.
Well, wait a second. So, Eric, you're saying it's Anthony Rendon and not Jameis Winston and not Kyler Murray?
Yeah, no, look, with respect, and I mean, Murph could talk more about Kyler Murray. He saw him for 3 games. I saw him for 1. Murray was fantastic. And Jameis Winston, when he played at FSU, he was a closer. No, Rendon was a stud. I mean, even back when he was playing at Rice, people were talking about him at the next level. I don't think, I know Kyler Murray ended up at a first-round pick, Murph, but, I mean, Rendon is a stud, and obviously the career he's had in the major leagues. I mean, this guy's headed for the Hall of Fame. You can make the argument he's the best third baseman in baseball. I know a lot of people love Nolan Arenado. Well, that's great. You play in Colorado, you play a lot of meaningless games. That's great. I'm taking Rendon if I was starting a team at third base. I know Murph is right now cringing at that comment. But the guy was phenomenal. He was as Murph mentioned, you're right, he was a semifinalist for the Golden Spikes Award in the Hauser Trophy back in 2011, actually, Murph. It was actually
2011 or 2010? Because he was also a semifinalist in 2010. Oh, no.
The answer is, he was the winner. He was the Hauser winner in 2010 as the National Player of the Year. And he was the Rawlings Sporting Goods National Player of the Year. The guy's decorated. Well decorated.
Yeah. I think he was correcting my previous statement, Rendon was a Golden Spike semifinalist in 2010, not 2012, when Chris Duffy was also a Golden Spikes finalist, along with, and again, it's the stat that never fails to amuse me. So guys like Anthony Rendon and Trevor Bauer were not Golden Spikes finalists in 2010, but Chris Duffy was, along with Yasmani Grandal, Drew Pomeranz, Chris Sale, and Bryce Harper.
Shout out to our boy Chris Duffy. He's my boy now.
What a year!
He had a great year. Maybe the best.
What a great year for college baseball. Yeah.
Who also didn't you mention there was not a Golden Spikes finalist at all there, Murph?
Who was that?
Garrett Cole. He's had a pretty good week too, hasn't
he? He's also a rich man, the richest man in the history of baseball per average annual value. It's quite a year.
And native, by the way, original native of Syracuse, New York, I should say.
Well, no, don't do that. Don't do that, Jeffrey. He's ours. He's a SoCal kid. Don't do that.
Oh wait, you owe me an apology because you were defiant. You were convinced he was going back West Coast. You did not think he was going.
I gotta stop buying into these emotional storylines because we all think these guys are going home, right? Like everyone thought that Anthony Rendon was going to go sign with the Rangers, and go back to where his roots were. Much like people thought that Garrett Cole was going to sign with the Angels because he grew up in Orange County. And we've seen this a lot. Or CeCe Sabathia in 2009, people thought that he was going to sign with either the Giants or the A's because he grew up in that area. He didn't. So yeah, I gotta stop buying into the hometown narrative. That doesn't work in baseball. What does work in baseball is money, lots of money, all guaranteed.
Big
guaranteed.
Giant bags of cash.
Big cash money.
I'm just happy I don't have to ask you like a month from now, hey, what's more likely to happen? So-and-so to sign or UCF opening day? Like, I'm glad we don't have to go through that like we had to do that last year.
No.
This has been a fantastic week. This has been a fantastic week for baseball. Not that it means that baseball is labor. Not that means that baseball is going to have some labor strife here in the coming years as the CBA expires and still has a lot of problems with the sport in terms of its free agents and its system. But this was a nice week for baseball to actually be in the storylines at the winter meetings and have it mean something.
And by the way, for those who are wondering, well, what does Garrett Cole and the Yankees have to do with UCF? Well, actually, a lot, because there's a lot of UCF people that are Yankee fans. The voice of UCF, Mark Daniels, is a diehard Yankee fan. Murph, I think you told me our good friend Dan Forcella, the media relation, he's a Yankee fan, correct?
He is a Yankee fan. Jeffrey Pena, who looks like UCF starting center fielder right now for this season, is a Yankees fan. Jeff Sharon is a Yankee fan.
Big Yankee fan.
Even though he's very critical, did you really compare Garrett Cole signing to like Kevin Brown or Randy Johnson?
No, I said please don't be any of those guys. I didn't compare it to those guys. I'm like, I'll be happy as long as he pans out. Unlike all those other guys, I even dropped a Jack McDowell reference in there. So.
Oh my goodness. Murph, we don't have to worry about that.
As long as Garrett Cole doesn't flip off the fan base, then he'll be fine. He will not be
if you've listened to this show, Brian Murphy is obviously a Yankee fan, one of our diehard listeners. Sam Unger is a Yankee fan. So there's a lot of ties with the Yankees and UCF, so it's very relevant. But how about Brian Murphy in the year 2020? Could be set up as one of Brian's best years, Murph, because Yankees are poised to be one of the favorites to win the World Series. Heck, I mean, I'm reading now as we take this that they're going after Josh Hader, which we can discuss that off the air. How is that going to work? But anyway, and then you're a Laker fan.
Yeah.
You're a Laker fan who I saw on Wednesday night. They have the best record in the NBA. LeBron James on his way to an MVP year. He had a triple-double. Dwight Howard is playing the role as a goon, starting fights. You could have a repeat of 2009, Murph, where your two favorite teams, the Lakers and Yankees, win championships in the same year.
I can't wait. Everybody knows it's been thin times for the Lakers for the past handful of years. In the last years of Kobe, and the Yankees' dark ages have been making it to the ALCS, which is still great. But no, they're ready to pounce. I'm trying to tie this back into UCF football because we are a UCF podcast, are we not?
But here's the team that's going to stand in the Lakers' way, Murph, is the LA Clippers, and potentially BJ Taylor could have an impact. He's owned by the Clippers. Huh? There's your UCF. That's how you tie it in.
That's a great job by you. By the way, I'll mention, since you brought up 2009, UCF played in the bowl game, played basically in the same bowl game that year that they're playing in this.
Oh, yeah.
So we're getting this train back on the tracks. And lost to Rutgers 45-21 because Mohamed Sanu looked nothing like a possession receiver in that game.
Yeah, and also
the head coach was Greg Schiano.
Who's back in Rutgers. That's right. So we will have.
Herb's back covering UCF. Greg Schiano's back at Rutgers. I mean, we're playing Marshall.
We're getting the band back together.
Everything old is new again.
We've got so we'll be previewing again the bowl game coming up on our show next week. We got Marshall. That's right.
Got it.
They are Marshall. And we'll be.
Can Murph give us can part of the preview be like Murph give us a movie review of We Are Marshall with Matthew McConaughey? Maybe I think that's. Jeff, do you remember? Because I don't know if you guys remember, there was a UCF Marshall game where Matthew McConaughey was actually on the sideline.
Yeah, and UCF won that game on a field goal at the end by Michael Torres. So
yes,
UCF kicker on Twitter. Right? Holler at Michael Torres. 07, I want to say it was.
So there you go, Murph. You've got an assignment. Give us a movie review of.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. That was 06. Yes.
No, I know my Matthew McConaughey history. Trust me.
So, well, we've got that. We've got all that stuff. We've got plenty to come around with.
Can we invite him to the Gasparilla Bowl?
Well, I don't know if we can do that, but the invitation still stands out there, Matthew McConaughey. We'll be previewing that and plenty more in next week's show. For now, by the way, thanks again to Jeremy Brener. You can follow him at Jeremy Brener on Twitter. Thanks again to you guys, Eric Lopez Elo, spokes_Murphy on Twitter. And thanks, of course, to you, the listeners. You can follow us at Black Gold Banneret, UCF_Banneret on Twitter, Facebook.com/Black Gold Banneret. So for Eric and Brian, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week.